channel. He's one of our favorites. He's Star Trek columnist, also host of the Royce Unchained podcast. He is one Patrick Royce, and you can follow him on Twitter at Patrick_Royce. Pat, how are you? How you been?
Oh, I'm not feeling too good. I'm finally the sage of Minnesota sports writing. I feared today that Sydney would no longer be with us, and I'd have to adopt that mantle of being the oldest guy in the sports writing business in the Twin Cities. So it's been quite a couple of days since we found out. Sid Hartman is the first 100-year-old to die, and we were all shocked. We all thought he was indestructible. My big fear was I wrote his advance obit 10 years ago, and that I'd end up with the byline on it posthumously, but I outlasted him as it turned out. So.
Well, Troy Aikman made the comment in the Fox football broadcast last night in which, because Sid called him many a time looking for quotes about the Vikings, and Troy said, he was 100? I thought he was 70.
He thought he was what, 50?
70. He thought he was 70.
Well, he was, it was incredible. He was, he's a Russian of Jewish descent, and there's this tribe of those people who lived out by the Black Sea, who traditionally lived to be about 115, and I think that's where Sid's family must be from, because he wasn't until he fell down and broke his hip, in 2016, that he's really had to really slowed down, and then he ended up with a pair of sisters named Lacey and Larissa, who were great gals, and they were both nurses, and they kind of alternated spending the day with him and getting him around and doing all that stuff. But until he broke his hip at age 96, I mean, he wasn't driving, thank God. They should have took his license away when he was 30. He was the worst driver that ever lived. If you rode with him, I mean, it was like you just laid in the back seat and prayed. But he was, until he broke his hip, he was, running around doing his stuff, and he was still, he had a column in the paper the morning he died.
I know. Pat, I mean, is there any way for a sportscaster or a journalist to go out the way Sid did? Okay, you die and everybody picks up the paper and reads your work.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. He was always, I describe him as an insecure egomaniac. A different combination, but he was, I'd love to write this parody, but I think it would be too irreverent. That's every time Sid wrote a eulogy, it became a eulogy to himself. It was basically about how much he did for the guy who died, was generally speaking, were his eulogies. And I'd like to write a parody of what a Sid eulogy to Sid would be like, but I think maybe that would be too much for our readers to take. So,
Pat, I kind of thought about Sid in this regard. I hope I'm not way off base here, but when Daryl Morey quit from the Rockets, and we all really think he quit there, I'm just trying to think, in today's world, how would the columnist / general manager of the basketball team be accepted when basically the Rockets guy got ran out for saying free Hong Kong? I mean, that's all I could. When Morey quit, I was thinking Sid Hartman would then go to the paper and write about what he wanted to as a GM. Well, it's fascinating.
Well, that's the one bow they made to ethics back then. In 1947, he took a check for $15,000 to Detroit from Maury Chalfin, who was like the Holiday on Ice guy, very prominent fellow in town, and he bought the Detroit Gems out of the National Basketball League. They had been 4-46 that year. Bought them for $15,000 and basically became the de facto general manager. But as part of the deal, he did not write often about the team in his column. He covered the Gophers more and everything. He didn't write a lot about the Lakers. They wouldn't let him praise the Lakers management in his column since he was Lakers management. That was about the only concession they made to that somewhat strong conflict of interest. Well, Dave, when they were trying to get the Major League Baseball in Minnesota, the head of the task force to get baseball was Charlie Johnson, the sports editor of the Afternoon Star and the Morning Tribune. He was basically the sports columnist, the sports editors were the guy who made stuff happen. You had a lot of that down in Florida years later. Tom McEwen in Tampa was in St. Pete was extremely powerful up there, and again was in on negotiations to get NFL teams and all the like that. So, but back then, with a little different view of what the involvement could be with of sports writers with their teams. That's for sure.
It is difficult to imagine in any other city in the country, wherever it is that you're from and grew up, the most powerful sports voice in your market. That's what Sid Hartman was. And he was on the radio, and he was in the paper. And he loved his backyard, and he vociferously defended it. And he loved his Gophers, Pat. And the Gophers are going to play football, and they're going to play the Little Brown Jug on Saturday. It's a hell of a way to open the season. All right. Is this row the boat act going to keep working?
Well, I would have to try to look it up, but I cannot recall. It has to be the 60s, the last time the Gophers were favored against Michigan, I would think. They're 2.5-point favorites to beat Michigan, and somebody's got to try to find that because, Murray Warmath used to consistently beat Bump Elliott in the early 60s, and then they got rid of Bump and brought in Bo Schembechler in the mid-60s. So 55 years, I'm not sure they've been favored against Michigan in that time. And they've only beaten them like 3 times. Now they stopped playing them regularly. It used to be obviously Little Brown Jug was an annual game, but they lost a lot of defense. They should be really good offensively now that Rashad Bateman came back. Their ace receiver was going to go to the NFL, and then like the rest of them, when the Big Ten started playing, they came back. But I don't know if they can stop Michigan from running the ball. They probably could beat them. But it's interesting with people not being allowed to come to the game in any kind of numbers. It's hard to say how much fire there is for this. Game day's coming again for the second straight game, actually, but you can't have people there watching it. So it's a completely different environment. So it's hard to say how fired up people are. I think the Vikings are helping the Gophers stock every time they play, though, don't you, David? I think they're making they're creating more interest in the Gophers every time Kirk Cousins throws a pass. So that's so it is one of the saddest things in Minnesota sports is when they humiliated themselves Sunday against Atlanta. We didn't have 60,000 people to escort them off the field at halftime. It would have been brilliant. It would have the glass roof would have exploded. They would have been booing Cousins so hard. So that certainly improved the Gopher stock. That's for sure.
Well, there's no doubt there, Pat, because this is, David wasn't a Kirk Cousins guy. I was indifferent on him, but it's looking a lot like Washington Kirk Cousins, where, he had a bunch of great numbers there in the second half after they're down 30 points.
God, he's the, the watch list. Everybody has a watch list. If you're a college football player, you're on a watch list. You're like a bum, right? I mean, you're a third team guard. But a couple of weeks ago, I was saying that Kirk Cousins is on the garbage time Hall of Fame watch list, but he's absolutely gone above that now. He's first team. He's first ballot garbage time Hall of Famer now. After, he threw in 3 interceptions in the first half, and he still ended up with a 90 passing rate because he was really efficient once it didn't mean anything.
Yep,
So,
once they were down 30. Yeah, he looked
he's
terrific.
He's a hard guy to like. Not only is a mediocre player, but when he's trying not to act arrogant, he's more offensive than when he's just being arrogant. He's one of the, it's so insincere when he's trying not to be arrogant that it offends you more than him just being the pompous ass that he is.
Well, Pat, what's interesting about the Vikings, though, is that, this is a team that's had, I think, 5 straight winning seasons and made the playoffs 4 times. I mean, the GM and the head coach both have extensions, they're building something, etc. And now it seems as if it's all fallen apart so quickly. I mean, that to me is the interesting thing. Is this just a rough patch that everybody, organization and fans included, are just going to have to put their big boy pants on, suck it up, and deal with? Or is this actually the foretelling of this is where this franchise really is, and holy blank, we've fallen off a cliff?
I don't know, because here's the deal. They got these young cornerbacks playing, and they got these other guys. And you guys have been in it not as long as me. God help us who has been now. But we all know that everybody says, well, we're young. But sometimes those young guys, sometimes you're losing because those young guys are never going to get better, right? That they're not. So is Cameron Dantzler going to be a good cornerback? I don't know. Right now, he's horrible. And that Gladney guy and these kids are playing. Okay, they're young. They're young. Okay, can they play? Sometimes they can't play. And so I think there's a lot of mystery about this. But here's the other deal: as those guys, let's say in 2 years, those guys can both play corner. Well, by then Harrison Smith will be early 30s, and Anthony Harris will probably be gone, and so you'll have holes created elsewhere. And the other thing is they haven't given us any information on Danielle Hunter, but it's obviously it is a neck of some kind, and if he comes back to full health. It's too late for this year, but they probably will end up holding them out all this year because it's too late for this year. But they certainly need that kid. I mean, he's fantastic, but defensively right now they're terrible, and we're all worried up here about Zim, because Zim's got the 39-year-old girlfriend that has now hit the internet, and we wonder if his concentration is as good as it should be. So. This Instagram model that he's former Instagram model is Zim's girlfriend here last year. So it's just hit the TMZ and those other websites now. So we're wondering if Zim's concentrating fully. I don't know.
I don't know if any of us are now, because our whole audience just went to Instagram to try to figure out who the hell she is, Pat.
She's not. I don't think she's an Instagram model now, but she was recently. And she does appear to be a fetching young lady. So anyway.
All right, Pat. The Big Ten, look, this was a mess how they handled it. I think we all have our different opinions of how it was done, but now there's no wiggle room. I mean, we've already watched Florida down here have 2 games postponed. Yeah. Fortunately, they had a bye week, and they built in a week at the end of the season, so they hopefully can get their season done. There's zero wiggle room. How many teams of the 14 teams in the Big Ten, always easy to say, how many of the 14 actually play a full schedule in your eyes, Pat? This is a pretty tough road.
Oh, yeah, well, Jeff Brom's already tested.
Right.
The Purdue coach, so I don't know. I mean, in the northern climes where everybody is going to be indoors all the time, right? I mean, we probably have more problems than there are in Florida, because you can still go outside in Florida. But everything they're telling us about this pesky virus is that the more that people have to stay indoors, the more that it's going to spread. And so I mean, the Big Ten doesn't have a lot of short sleeve weather when you're starting your season on October 20, whatever, and you're playing into December. This is not exactly going to be ideal weather for playing football games. Minnesota, because of all those years in the Metrodome, people started staying away from Gopher games in November because it was too cold. I wonder how December is going to work out. And by the way, they gave the Gophers about 5 Friday night games too, which is really stupid. So, I mean, they're not going to be people there, but the idea that you're going to go out there and freeze to death and see a decent quality of football is ridiculous to me. But you're right. Who knows how many are going to make it to the finish line? I don't know.
Pat, when do you head south? When will we see you in the 239?
We're going to have snow today, so after a gorgeous spring, a wonderful summer, a great early fall, I think Winter said, okay, you thought that was real, huh, you idiots? We'll give you the good stuff here pretty soon. So Winter has arrived a little early here, to say the least. So I don't know, but I probably will be there sooner rather than later. I was saying in the Zoom era, doesn't make any difference if you're at home or in Florida covering sports, because you got to do all your interviews on Zoom. And we'd have to be off the air for me to tell you what I think of Zoom interviews. It might include several profanities that would not be good for your audience.
We may need Pat for a bonus Twitch hour one of these.
Right.
We can talk freely.
What? I've heard of this Twitch, but it's just something I get when I look at Zim's girlfriend. I don't know what Twitch is.
Well, she is a fetching young lady after all. Pat Royce, Star Trib, he does a podcast. It's Royce Unchained, and you can find it on scorenorth.com, and follow Pat on Twitter at Patrick_Royce. Pat,
let me tell you that if you're interested in Sid down there, I did 2 hours with Suture on an MNST podcast. And then we got an hour with Judd on Sid, and then Dan Ferrero at KFAN had like 3 hours on Sid. You got more Sid news up here than you could possibly want.
And Sid is loving every minute of it.
Oh God, yes. Nobody thought more of Sid than Sid. Okay.
Pat, stay safe, especially with the snow. Be well. Look forward to seeing you soon.
All right, gentlemen. Thank you.
Pat Royce.
Oh, I love him.
Yep.
I love him. By the way, it is a winter weather advisory today in Minneapolis. He's not joking. They're going to get snow today.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Snow.
Yes.
5 to 8 inches of snow expected in Minneapolis today.
Minnesota and Wisconsin, I believe. There was snow in Iowa yesterday. Jeff in Iowa in our Twitch chat rooms letting us know. Mark, I got to Fargo in late September. It was 70 plus and sunny. And I said, wow, this is great. And I brought my golf clubs. And I'm like, how much longer is golf season? They said 2 weeks. So what do you mean 2 weeks? It's 75 and sunny. And sure enough, by Columbus Day every year, the golf courses were closed. And first snowfall was always before Halloween.